Hello and welcome to the 2024 Pitch Educational Zoom session. We are so excited to have you all here today and to begin the first process for the pitch. We have a fantastic panel here today, and on behalf of DWLA as the 2024 president, I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists here today. This program is immensely successful because of the deep bench and talent of our in-house partners, such that we have today. I'm really excited for today's program. And as I said in my notes yesterday and an email to all the pitch participants, please give the panelists your undivided attention and know that the more you put into this program, the more you are going to get out. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to our fabulous Jasmine Tobias. She is VP of Attorney Development for DWLA and is one of the inaugural pitch creators, mentors, and reasons that it keeps going. So Jasmine, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our esteemed panel.
Thank you, Stephanie. You are too kind. So just to repeat, I'm Jasmine Tobias, VP of Attorney Development with DWLA, and I am going to introduce you to our first panelist this afternoon. So our moderator for our first panel, which is the Road to the Pitch, our moderator is Chastity Henry, and Chastity is the Vice President and Deputy General Counsel at Jacobs Engineering. In her role, Chastity leads a talented group of nearly 60 attorneys and professionals in providing critical support to the business and connecting team and individual purpose and values with those of the company to maximize performance and impact. A zealous advocate for diversity and inclusion, particularly in the legal profession, Chastity is very active in organizations that advance and promote those aims. She's the founder of the New Roundtable, which is dedicated to the advancement of Black women attorneys, and she helped launch the DAP Direct Job Placement Program, which connects law firms and corporations with exceptional women of color during their first year of law school. Chastity is also active in the Dallas community and mentors high school, college, and law students and young professionals. Joining Chastity this afternoon are Kalisha Stewart, who is the Deputy GC of the Dallas Cowboys Football Club, which, as a lifelong Dallas Cowboys fan, despite the heartbreak, I'm so excited that she's joining us this afternoon. In her role as the Deputy General Counsel of the Dallas Cowboys, Kalisha spends her time negotiating agreements, managing litigation, and using creative problem solving to mitigate risk. This semester, Kalisha co-created and co-teaches an advanced level sports law class at the SMU Dedman School of Law. She's a native Texan and West Coast lover, and Kalisha holds an economics degree from Texas A&M University and her JD from Stanford Law School. She began her career as a capital markets associate at Jones Day Dallas. And joining them are Anthony Bigon, who is the director and head of global litigation and compliance at Trellix. In his role at Trellix, which is a leading global cybersecurity company, he draws from his rich international experience and approaches legal challenges with a client-centric mindset. Beyond his professional endeavors, Anthony is deeply committed to serving his community and has served key leadership positions in various nonprofits and charitable organizations, including being a board member of Big Thought and chairing the Legal Risk Management and Development Committees. Prior to joining Trellix, Anthony sharpened his skills in commercial litigation and white-collar defense while practicing at law firms in Dallas, Texas. He holds his BA in political science from Bates College and a JD from the University of Minnesota Law School. And without further ado, I will let our panelists take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. And thank you everyone for being here. Special thanks to the Dallas Women Lawyers Association, to Marissa, Jennifer, Stephanie, everyone involved in putting on this great program. I've had the pleasure of being involved as a moderator for the past few years, and it's always a really great experience. So the bar is set high by past programs that they've put on, and I know we won't disappoint today. And we welcome your comments, your questions, your feedback as we go along, because we really want this to be a dialogue. So But without further ado, we have some great panelists with amazing experience to share with you all. I'm very excited to get started. And so we will just jump right in. We want to talk about, we're talking about the road to the pitch. So you talk about the pitch in the next panel. We really want to set the stage and engage around how you get there. And so I think we would all three agree that it is about building relationships. Relationships matter. And the question that we want to explore first is how you build those relationships with in-house counsel. And so, Anthony and Kalisha, I'll let you answer the first question. Let's talk about staying in touch. You know, how do you stay in touch with, how does an in-house counsel stay in touch with you when they've met you somewhere? Forwarding articles, sending gifts, lunch invitations, CLEs. What's effective in your opinion if someone's trying to build that relationship with you?
I can jump in. Again, one, thank you all for having me. Happy to be here. You know, like Chastity said, I think the relationships are key. One of the things in terms of keeping in touch is keep in touch with everyone, especially those who you think might be in-house, whether it's law school classmates, you know, colleagues, partners. Is one of the advice that I got, and a lot of the folks that I continue to keep in touch with. But you know, one of the things that I actually really like is just the ambient kind of connection, whether that's via email or text message, or even LinkedIn, as long as it's not too frequent, right? The occasional, hey, I'm just checking up on you, based on our last conversation. Maybe you made a note about a life event, but something where there's a kind of a personal connection and it's not just about work all the time. Forwarding, you know, one of my former colleague of mine, we used to just kind of geek out on non-legal books. And, you know, he's a partner at a firm now. And every year I know I'm going to expect a new book from him that I'll read. Like, I enjoy that. And it's those touch points that seem very simple, but it's very thoughtful and effective, where like he's just top of mind. And I'm hopefully thinking about giving him work one day, as long as everything works out. But, you know, there's not, you know, I don't think there's you know, you don't have to overcomplicate it, but use all the mediums you have, but definitely know in terms of the person that you're dealing with, what they like, right? You know, email and text messages are probably my go-to. LinkedIn, I'm not a big fan of. And usually when I get messages on LinkedIn, I just ignore them, even though I see them. So, you know, do a little bit of digging and being a little bit thoughtful about it. But, you know, less is more, and having that personal connection is definitely key.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that Anthony shared. I think that's great advice. You know, one piece of advice that I got really early on in my career when I was starting at Jones Day was from a junior partner who told me that for him, he thought the key to business development was to make sure that you have a lot of lines in the water. And I interpreted that to mean, you know, really it's about playing the long game. You know, not everyone that you meet is going to be able to give you business, even if they wanted to right then. That these relationships take time to develop, and you know, kind of the forces of the universe have to come together. I mean, the relationship with you, but then also the need of the business to get work done by someone with your particular skill set. That doesn't necessarily happen overnight. So having those different lines in the water is really important. The other thing that I would say is really consider the value of your relationships with people who are perhaps more junior in their roles, because, you know, if things all work out as they should, eventually they'll be in a great position to offer you work. And by the time they get there, you will have that foundation and that relationship built up. For us, we hire lawyers that we trust and that we respect and that we like. And those three things take time to develop.
Great. I mean, those are both really, really good tips and really important things to think about in building relationships. So once that initial contact is made, what do you think about what's the best way to get you, you know, to follow up with you? Is it a lunch invite? Is it a golf outing, maybe dinner, CLEs? And what, can you talk about some things that have been compelling to you? We can start with Kalisha.
Okay, perfect. So, I think it is going to be dependent on the clients that you're targeting. For a lot of us, whether in-house or working at a firm, life is just very, very busy. So what I've noticed is that the deeper my relationship is with my outside counsel, the more willing I am to take on, accept invitations that are more involved. I probably wouldn't go to a charity gala or a long involved dinner with someone I just met, but that would be something I would love to go to with some of the outside counsel that we've been working with, and that we've built up sort of that friendship in addition to the work that we do together. So that's me personally, and that's partly just because life is busy and dinners are time with family, that there's got to be a good reason to break away from that. That being said, some of the things that we've done that have really helped build that trust, respect that I was talking about earlier was we've had firms come in and do trainings with our legal team, but sometimes even also with our business team. And it doesn't necessarily always need to be a CLE because, something qualifying for a CLE, there's a lot of administrative hoops that you have to jump through. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a CLE in order to be valuable to us. So as a concrete example, we had a firm come in and talk to us about their particular offerings on data privacy, but the presentation itself was built around helping us understand new trends in data privacy laws in Texas in particular. We have a small legal team, so we don't have a lot of bodies on our team to build deep expertise in some of these areas. So having a firm come in and teach us here are the trends in Texas in particular that you need to be aware of on data privacy. And the thing that was a real kicker that I was extremely impressed was they went on a few of our key websites and identified areas of risk and areas where we could improve our privacy policy. And these guys were such experts that it would surprise me if that took more than a couple hours to go through our websites. And so this had the really added benefit of, one, they came to our building, they had lunch with us, they got to know us a little bit, and vice versa. They taught us some things that we didn't know about what we need to keep in mind with data privacy. They scared us straight by telling us some of the things, the open needs that we didn't even know that we had for our website. And yes, we hired them. We have, an ongoing relationship with them now, and we didn't get CLE credit for it or anything like that, but it was extremely valuable to us and to them.
Awesome, great examples. What about you, Anthony?
Yeah, no, those are great examples, and just to piggyback on some in terms of like breakfast, lunch, happy hour, dinner, those are good. I would say just be mindful of who you're asking and whether that's really going to fit in their schedule. Similar to Kalisha, like I don't want to spend a 3-hour dinner with someone that I don't know very well, but coffee and breakfast is perfect. Like that's what I would prefer. I'm an early riser. Let's do it early, and then I can have the rest of my day. Lunches are usually pretty good because we're going to land in that, hour and 15-minute mark. Because we're very busy just looking at, responding to email and just wanting to kind of balance some of the pressures of work in home, just like you all. But so just be mindful of that and throw out some other suggestions. The CLE option is great. I actually offer that specifically to kind of senior associates and junior partners. And I say, hey, come in, whether we get credit or not, if there's some emerging kind of legal issue or some new trends like AI, or an LNE, the non-competition thing that's getting a lot of buzz. Come in and talk to our legal team about it. I can't see anybody on this call, but if that's something you're interested in, I will happily take you up on that offer. Surprisingly, I've one person have taken me up on that offer in the last year or so. And it just creates a little bit of buzz, and people will start asking, and you might get connected with someone else on my team that, maybe may be better suited for some of the work that you do or other work on your team. It is honestly one of the easiest ways to get into corporate legal departments is offering, it could be very high level. the email, the weekly or monthly email listservs on different topics, those are good too, but that face-to-face and live interaction would be great. Kind of even piggybacking off of that, if find someone in-house that you would want to co-author a journal article on something, or present at a conference, because even if that experience was probably good, like I'll always remember, okay, me and so at Jones Day authored this article 5 years ago. I know them, and just that experience for that back and forth. Mind you, we'll probably have, a first year associate write most of it and we'll take the credit, but it will still be a good experience. And we both get a little bit of, brand recognition through that, or, if we prepared for a presentation, don't be afraid to offer that and just say, man, I know your expertise. I saw you were at this firm, you did litigation, L&E, let's present at this DBA conference on this topic. And that experience is relationship building, and probably one of the best ones that people, I think Chastity and Kalish would agree that we remember, and you can highlight your expertise in ways that are not just so, hey, I'm really great at this, hire me. We kind of see it on the forefront. So yeah, those, just take advantage. It takes a little bit of work at first, but very effective, I think.
Great. Those are all great, very practical tips. Remember, it's relationship building, meet people where they are, do what fits into their schedule, offer CLEs or write an article, get to know people. Completely agree. And I would add to that, just do things that you're interested in and passionate about. So develop that interest, that passion, and that tends to put you in the same place as people who are also interested in those activities, those events. And you can build some really genuine relationships that way. For instance, mentoring. I'm involved in an organization where we mentor law students, and I often ask law firm folks and in-house folks to join in doing that. And in doing so, we get to know one another, but in service of a cause that we're both very passionate about. And that's a way to build some genuine relationships as well. So moving. Oh, go ahead, Felicia.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to underscore what you were saying. I completely agree. Some of the outside counsel that I have on my list that I want to send work out to have been folks who I've connected with my law students, or that we connect at the industry conferences that I go to, or perhaps we're on a committee together, an ABA committee together within our particular industry that we focus on. And even the DWLA is a perfect example. For example, this very panel, we did a prep call for it on Friday, got to know Jasmine, and now I know that if I have an issue on a non-compete, I know exactly the person that I need to call, because she explained her experience. I saw her passion and her interest, why she's at the firm she's at, and I would love to be able to work together. At no point did Jasmine try to sell the Cowboys any work. It was just, we're working together on this project. She's, awesome, as all of you probably know by now, and now I got to know her. I understand what her work is. And so in my mind, okay, I know I have a non-compete person if I have an issue around that. So I think that getting involved on the community side, it's a great way. I totally agree, Chastity.
So that's a perfect example. All right, so let's say someone has gotten to know you and they're doing the right things and building a relationship. At what point do they make the ask? Because we know, if we're friends with or building a relationship with someone who is at a law firm and can offer their services, I think we all kind of expect for that to happen at some point. Now, oftentimes it doesn't, and we can get into that as well. People just never make the ask. Sometimes they do, but what have you observed? What to do, what not to do, what's effective when it's time, and then the timing of making the ask. I'll start with Anthony on this one.
Yeah, no, this is a tough one, right? Because there's a lot of, what you're observing, and you're trying to collect enough information, and you don't want to be too forward. But I do find that there's an issue, particularly with younger attorneys, senior attorneys, but younger, that the ask never comes. which can play against you because then there's maybe, there's a lot of things that could be going through my head. So, I think one of the things I would say is it doesn't hurt to keep things open, right? You can generally, if you don't know what's really going on, in terms of what are my immediate needs, just say, if you have any questions on this topic, or you want me to look at something, like, don't hesitate to reach out. And it could be one of those just, if you want to just bounce some ideas off of me, if you have a business or legal question, and start there. And what that will hopefully do is you can start to learn more about what my pain points actually are, where you can make a direct ask or at least make a proposal. On the litigation side, sometimes you may know that we get sued. That it's always a little bit tricky if you want to put it, bring it to our attention in terms of what you put in that email, right? I don't want a 10-page proposal. I don't want to have your firm bio in the bio of all the attorneys there. Just say, hey, I saw this come through. I know you probably have counsel, your go-to counsel, but if you didn't make any decision, I'd love to be considered. I think that's probably one of the best phrases that I always hear, because I'll always consider you. And I think people don't use that enough. They either making an ask from that one at all, but just say, I'd love to be considered for X. And, I'd love to submit a proposal if that's something that you're looking for. But it's hard, I think at some point, I think you should make the ask, whether that's in a practice area or a particular matter. But, keeping it open and being a little bit direct and slowly easing in is if you don't have all the information you need, it would be my recommendation. And again, just ask to be considered, because that'll get my brain going and keep you in mind and probably ask you for a proposal.
Great point.
I love that phrasing, Anthony. I think that's absolutely perfect because it communicates the ask in a way that doesn't feel as transactional. My key piece of advice is when it comes to the first time that you're approaching this prospect of asking for work, I would recommend offering something versus asking for something as your opening salvo. So whether it's, hey, I would love to come and share some information about what you and your HR team should be on the lookout for when it comes to unionization. Would y'all want to do a virtual meeting or anything? Let me know. Something like that. So offering something, or hey, we have our summer starting in June. If there's any research projects you'd like to get them going, I'm not going to bill you for it, but I will oversee it. That has been really effective because getting good interns, I mean, these big firms do such great vetting and they get great summers. So I would love to work with some summers and get some research projects done. And then also the summers get some fun experience, hopefully. So I would recommend try offering something first versus asking for something first. And I think that might even make it feel more comfortable. And then through that process, you'll learn a lot about the company, as Anthony mentioned. So that would be something I would recommend you consider.
Awesome. I love those points. Ask to be considered, which, I don't think anyone will be offended by that, and offer something and not just make an ask. Those are fantastic points. I wonder if you see any differences in approaches between men and women on making the ask. I will state that I do. I have. Men who I really don't know well, if at all, will make the ask. It may be via email, via LinkedIn, via very, very attenuated and tangential connection that we have. But they may ask, and I may be annoyed by it. I may ignore the LinkedIn message like Anthony, but they make the ask, and it didn't hurt anything, right? Maybe potentially a future relationship, but I'm sure they'll make the ask of other people. But I've had women who I've had close relationships with. We've met doing community service. We've done all the things that you all are talking about, who, have surprised me by not making the ask. And they may be surprised when, the work goes to someone else because they weren't on the radar. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. I have women friends at law firms who are fantastic and will directly make the ask. And I appreciate it. And there are male friends who won't. So I'm not going to generalize, but just wondering if you saw any differences when it comes to making the ask.
That has been my experience too. I have just seen men be more forward with asking for what they want. But the other thing that I would say is that I do think that in lawyering and in business development, I think that being a woman can certainly be a superpower. I mean, we always hear about the disadvantages of being in the legal field as women, and I hear it a lot of working in a male-dominated industry in sports as a woman. But the longer I do this work, the more convinced I am that being a woman in a male-dominated industry can really work to our advantage. And the reason why is because for most of us, ever since we were little girls, we've been socialized to be very mindful of other people's feelings, understand how other people might be thinking, have a lot of social and emotional intelligence. That's something that we've really been trained for since we were little. And I think that when it comes to what could potentially be an awkward conversation, whether it's making the ask or having a difficult conversation with a colleague, we've been set up for this for a long time. So this whole idea of feel it out, be flexible, try to read the other person and know when the right time is and how to phrase things. I think that women have a special ability in the sense that we have been socialized to have good communication skills, good EQ, and those are the skills that I think will underpin what we're talking about when it comes to very thoughtful business development.
Great point. Anthony, anything from your perspective?
I mean, honestly, I think my experience is probably very similar to you two. I think the men tend to be a little bit more direct, and I will say that a lot of women that I've in this space that I've gotten to know have been more thoughtful about learning about our business or some of the real pain points that we have. But then the ask never comes, right? Or even not even the, will you consider? So, in over time, it could mean a lot of different things, men or women, whether they're just not confident or they don't feel like they're ready yet, or at least that's what I'm thinking, and maybe they're just waiting for a future time. But it's very rare that, and I don't know about you two, that you're gonna go for someone that's never done work for you, that you're gonna say, hey, I got this, without an ask being made, right? So, I would encourage you all, just figure out what makes you most comfortable, and even if it is a direct ask in the right way, can be effective. But I think you have to make the ask at some point, for the work to come through.
So true.
Good points. So once someone has connection with an in-house lawyer, maybe they've gotten an opportunity, they've received some work. How do they build on that to get business to other attorneys at their firm, or to broaden, deepen that relationship? I'll start with Kalisha first.
Yeah, so I really like when it's clear that the outside counsel that I'm working with, they're working at a firm that is collaborative. And the reason why I like it, because you might think, well, that's really none of your business. As long as the outside counsel you're working with is doing good work, then what do you care? And the reason I care is because when we're sending a matter out, we really only hire outside counsel for issues that are complex. We don't send work out for bandwidth issues, I guess you could say. And so if we have a complex matter, maybe it's a litigation matter that has some employment element or has some real estate element, it would make us feel more comfortable if we're working with a firm where we know that our relationship attorney feels comfortable bringing in a colleague that has the relevant expertise. So I love when our outside counsel brings one of their fellow partners or fellow associates to an event. Maybe we invite them to a Cowboys game. They bring some folks from their firm, so we get the opportunity to get to know them. It underscores that this is a collegial environment. We're not just hiring one lawyer with expertise in litigation. We're hiring this lawyer with expertise in litigation with access to other experienced professionals that may come into play too. So long way of saying that I do think that it's important. And one of the best ways I've seen it done is just to put your colleagues in front of us too.
Great, very good point. How about you, Anthony?
Yeah, real quick. I mean, I agree with that. If you can find ways to get your colleagues that you trust in front of us, I mean, great. You know, if we've established a relationship, we've worked on a few matters together, you know, this is the time where like the 3-hour dinner might make sense, or a sporting event. But use that as an opportunity to really start learning more about the business, right? Don't present maybe, you know, an antitrust attorney if that's not one of our pain points. You know, try to figure out what is it that, you know, I'm losing sleep over, if I'm ever losing sleep, or like, what is it that your general counsel or one of your colleagues in the sales or data privacy, like, what are the things, try to figure that out. And you can do that just by asking, right? Like, what does your data privacy program look like? You know, are you guys in every state? Are you guys global? You know, what are some of the issues that you have? Same thing on L&E. And then, you know, down the line, that's when you strategically pull in that L&E partner or that data privacy partner or the antitrust partner or colleague for us to get to know them. But the other thing too is like the CLEs, the co-authoring, the patent, all of that is still good. But then maybe, you know, introducing us to them and saying, hey, look, you both or someone else on my team, or pull in. I'm talking too fast, but I'm pulling in some other folks from my team that I might not necessarily have the expertise in, and connecting them and just trying to create this matrix that's really all connected to you and your firm, where anything that pops up, you should be, you know, hopefully one of the first 3 people that I'm thinking of. Again, it takes time and a little bit of effort, but it's not very complex if you've got some of the foundational work already laid. So.
Yeah, great points. And again, I think I'm hearing it goes back to the relationship and getting to know you, getting to know what your needs are too. And then that way you can figure out if it's something that person can help you with, or is there someone in their firm that can help solve those issues. Very good. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, how does someone find out that you have work? I know a part of this is about a formal pitch and a formal RFP, but we talked about on our prep call that it's not always very formal. So we decided to talk about the informal ways that you can find out that either there's a lawsuit, there's a transaction happening. You know, what are the best ways for people, you know, to find out that there's work? And if they find out, how can they maybe get their foot in the door and be in a position where they can get that work? And we'll start with Anthony first.
Yeah, look, so you know, this one is interesting because there's a couple different ways. You know, obviously, if you know we've been sued, you know, I know most firms have the trackers, and if you know our legal entity name, you'll probably find out before us. You know, but we don't typically do formal RFPs. So it's likely pretty hard to know, you know, exactly what we need when it comes, because these things come pretty fast. But you know, I think it goes back to some of the previous comments. If we do have a relationship, it's really always trying to figure out what are the pain points, understanding the business, understanding our industry, and just seeing what's potentially out there. You know, it's you know, I'm in a place where I'm usually going back to the same, I'd say 5 firms, even if it's something that I don't necessarily, that they don't necessarily have the expertise in or have done before, then I'm looking for referrals. So, you know, I don't really have a great answer other than keeping those touch points open and being top of mind, because a lot of it is timing, and being able to answer some of the day-to-day questions to the extent that they've been asked, because that's usually a gateway to say, hey man, I've got this issue brewing. You know, I may want to, you know, get some advice on how to deal with it. But if it does actually come into something a little bit larger, hopefully you'll be on the short list. So
Great. Alicia?
I totally agree. Perfectly said. I think the other thing that I'll mention is just how it feels to be on the other end of like a deluge of emails from outside counsel, other firms that we have never worked with because they've been monitoring that tracker and they see that we've been sued and they're very eager to let us know that they have the skills and the capability to help us in the lawsuit. I know we recently were involved in a patent litigation. It was a patent troll case, but I mean, we got dozens and dozens of emails from law firms that we had never worked with, had never heard of. And, you know, on the one hand, it wasn't that it was irritating per se. It was cluttering up my inbox because we weren't going to read them. And then two, I felt bad in a sense because some of these firms put together very detailed memos. They had really seemed to spend a not insignificant amount of time, whether it was them, the partner themselves or their team, putting together a strategy and an approach to how they could help us get out of the litigation. And I just don't think that that was a worthwhile use of their time. But what would have been helpful is maybe if one of those firms said, hey, we know who you've been sued by. We've won 5 cases against him in the past year. Let us know if you want to hop on a 30-minute call and we'll tell you what we know about him. And then that would have been something that would have really caught our attention because for litigators, I'm making a little bit of an assumption, but for litigators, when your client gets sued, I'm thinking it's like, yes, go time. It's like, I'm ready. But for in-house counsel, when I get sued, my reaction is like, oh my gosh, it's stressful. It's not, it's not exciting. So it's not a very fun time. So it's not a great time to get a bunch of random emails from firms that we've never heard of. But what would pique our interest if there is something other than just like the typical law, legal analysis, which either we can do or the outside counsel that we use all the time can do. If there's something different, I have a relationship with the judge, or I know this defense counsel or the plaintiff's counsel really well, that would be something that would catch our attention.
Great advice. And so let's say someone else is able to catch your attention, whether, as Anthony said, just getting to know you little by little, offering advice, as Kalisha has stated, offering some helpful information about the specific case or litigation, and what if that person is more junior? Do they need to bring in support, maybe bring in a partner to have that credibility with you before they're able to actually handle the matter? Or what's your thought on how they can make headway?
So for me, the classic lawyer answer is it depends. So for me personally, I'm not I'm open to more junior folks. I was joking on our planning call that I don't need a lot of gray hair in the room to feel comfortable. But it's kind of like know your client, know where meet them where they're at. If I was maybe a really old dude general counsel who grew up in this profession in the old boys club, well, it's probably smart to bring someone to the meeting that they can connect with instantly on that level. It couldn't hurt. So is that fair that, oh, I've got to bring this dude with me because I think it'll make the dude client feel good? No, maybe not fair, but also like you could be fair, or you could have a better chance at getting the business. And I'm guessing the latter is more important, So I would say it's kind of know your audience. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, that, everyone can do this, but women in particular generally have really great EQ and kind of can read situations. So read the situation and respond accordingly.
Great
Yeah,
advice.
I 100% agree. I mean, it really depends. I mean, if for me personally, if we have the relationship and you are confident in that in your abilities, then the answer is you probably don't need it. If you feel more comfortable, or there's the strategic element, I think you definitely go for it, and put yourself in a situation to get the best results. But just make sure that you're always in the forefront and you're managing that relationship in a way that makes sense. Because Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think it just, Kalisha said everything that I would have said. It just really depends on who's on the other side and really read the room.
Yeah, and both of you made important points about reading the room, because I've had experiences where the room was definitely not read. And for instance, if we, at Jacobs, we have a very diverse legal team. And so to bring in a very homogenous, very male group of attorneys, either for CLE or for whatever it is, probably is not going to go over well. And plus, we have stated goals around inclusion and diversity. And so, yeah, that ability to just read the room and see what's needed for the situation is super, super important. So great point. So we have a little more time here, so before we open it up to questions. So I want to go actually take us back to the very, very beginning. We kind of started in a place where someone was in process of building a relationship, someone's trying to stay in touch, keep in touch. But let's back up to if a person has never met you two at all, right? And obviously, given your backgrounds and the companies you work for and your accomplishment, they probably want to meet you. People want to get to know you. And so how does that happen? Whether you're at an industry event or a CLE, how would you recommend that someone impromptu get to know you? What are they talked about? Just what general approach should they have? Anthony, you want to start? Or Kalisha, whoever wants to start.
Sure. This one's an interesting one. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
We can hear.
Kalisha, go ahead. I think I'm having some internet issues. I'll talk to you.
Okay.
Oh, you can hear me?
We
Okay.
can hear you.
Yeah, I think with this one, there might be a delay.
You're good.
Just be normal, be human, be personable, right? I think we're I've been at conferences or CLEs and either you're stuffing your face with food and someone comes in awkwardly and they want to make an introduction, or you're having a conversation with someone else and they interrupt. I think reading the room and just being as human as you can to make that genuine just connection. And it could just be, one of the hellos, we had a mutual connection. I'd love to steal some time from you later and chat about something, but don't give us the high level. I know I think you guys are going to work on elevator pitches and things like that, but I don't want to necessarily hear about your firm and how great it is, or at least in that initial introduction. If you do know something about the in-house counsel, whether they're on a board or you're from the same state, or you're whatever it may be, find that's just more of a personal connection. And it's more memorable, honestly, for me, and make that connection, make it quick. And then if there is a desire for a follow-up, if that moment doesn't make sense to have a full-blown conversation, just say, I'd love to chat with you more, after the conference, during the happy hour, or maybe grab coffee or something, that's not a 3-hour dinner. But I would just keep it real basic, real human to human connection, and then use the next opportunity to dive a little bit deeper.
I think that was perfectly said. I couldn't agree with you more. I think just if there's an in-house counsel or potential client that you'd like to meet, just keeping in mind that they're just humans too, putting on their pants one leg at a time. And I think just approaching them like you would approach really anyone that you'd like to meet and get to know. And that's the way I would do it. And that's the way that folks have done that and have started that relationship with me. The other sort of low effort, low cost way from a time perspective that you might consider recommending, particularly early on in the relationship, is maybe a 30-minute virtual coffee chat. And the reason why that might be nice is because you don't even have to leave your chair to do it. And I think that makes it like very, very low stakes. And that could be a nice way to get to know someone a little bit better too, particularly early on.
one more piece that was great advice too. Is look for introductions, right? If we have a relationship, but you don't have one with Kalisha, and you know that we know each other, I mean, ask me and just say, hey, I'd love to get an introduction at this event, and I'd be happy to make it. If I don't trust you, then I probably won't. No, I'm just kidding. But I think that's a very easy way, because then at least, assuming we all are, know each other to some degree and trust each other, it'll give you a little bit of a differentiator when it comes to, or they might remember you a little bit more. So, you definitely leverage introductions, whether that's from inside in-house counsel or even colleagues at other firms. So.
I
Great
totally
point.
agree. I think that's a great point, and it might be helpful to consider the ways that you can do that for other people. I do feel like, the more that you put that out, it will come back. You don't really know how, but by connecting others, I think that it can help grow your network, and sort of showing those acts of kindness. It really does come back to you in a big way. So I think that's a great point, Anthony.
Yeah, great points about, just, being that connector, making those introductions. And because people move too, you just never know where people are. They could be at a firm one day and house the next, back at a firm, who knows? And, it's just really important to treat people with kindness and respect. And like both of you have said, pay it forward and be a good person, be human. And I guess before we take the question, we did this in our prep call. So I want to make sure we differentiate. Anthony, you hit on this a little bit, just the difference between being human and a normal introduction. Hello, how are you? And launching into your 90-second elevator pitch, because the elevator pitch has value for sure, but maybe there's a time and a place for that. Anthony, you want to comment on that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think you should always have both, right? But definitely prepare what your elevator pitch is versus your kind of impromptu trying to get work kind of pitch. And there's definitely a differentiator, and I hate to keep using the cliches, but read the room, right? Whether we're at a conference, look at my body language. I move around with my hands a lot, but am I there to am I on a panel and I'm going to be speaking and I'm going to be doing all this versus a participant? Do I, kind of read the room and understand, which one that you're actually using, depending on the setting. But, and the difference between the two in terms of trying to make that either personal connection or going in a little bit deeper to sell yourself and your firm for potential work. I think knowing that distinction will be important depending on the setting and the circumstances.
Anything to add there, Felicia?
Oh, I think it's perfectly said. I think that I kind of see it as, your elevator pitch is about you and what is it that you do. And the pitch, like to pitch work, is really about your prospective client and about what you can do for them and the value that you and your firm bring to your client. Whereas again, the elevator pitch is kind of the answer, and maybe it's 30 seconds, maybe it's 60, maybe it's 90, depending on the environment, but it's kind of the answer to the question of, so what is it that you do? Tell me more about your practice area, which that can certainly come up very naturally. I've asked so many people that, and I do want to know, what is it that you do? And so to meet someone that can articulate that to me is great. Anthony and I both also need to have a good elevator pitch to explain to others what it is that we do. So I think that's something that we all need as professionals. And that's how I differentiate it, is the elevator pitch. It's about you and your work. The pitch that you're selling, it's really about the client and the value that you bring to that prospective client.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. Hadn't thought about that before. That's very true. All right, well, we have about 10 minutes left. Do we have any questions from the audience?
I've got one comment. Oh, looks like we have a hand raised. I don't know if they're typing it or saying it, but one comment that I think is, oh, go ahead.
Can you see the Q&A?
I can see the Q&A and I see
Okay.
it, but Anthony, if you want to make your comment first, and then we'll go to Dorothy, who has a question.
Oh, okay. Just what, yeah, I think Kalisha said this earlier. I mean, when you're thinking about this, you know, I don't want to put a number on it, but there's definitely like a 3 to 5 year, I think, period where you're cultivating these relationships. And I can't emphasize that enough. Like if it doesn't happen right away, like really think about it long term, because I think I don't know who just said it, that people move and things change. And you know, if you don't get success in the first 6 months or the first couple meetings, like that's okay. Think about it really long term. Right?
Great
That's
point.
all.
Yes, I do see that we have 2 questions in the Q&A. But we'll go to Dorothy first, and then I'll get to the questions as well. Hi, Dorothy.
I'm not sure, Dorothy may be muted because this is what the webinar, but she actually emailed me her question, so I will read it for you.
Perfect.
So Dorothy's question is, when you have a matter that needs outside counsel, but you don't have a firm in mind, how do you decide which firms to approach and or which firms get to pitch for the work? It's a great question.
So, yeah, I'm thinking back to a situation where that has come up. It's usually a pretty unusual situation, like maybe an antitrust issue where we don't run into antitrust issues, thankfully, very often. And how we've historically addressed that is we'll ask our insurance carrier, hey, who's the panel counsel that you recommend on this? So that's one way that we'll get some information, some good insight. But then the main way is that we'll go to our current counsel that we trust and say, you know, hey, who do you recommend on this? You know, like someone that we know, and we'll ask for a recommendation from them on another outside counsel that they trust.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much similar. I'm looking at referrals from firms that I use and trust, and to the extent I have a small pipeline of firms that I haven't used, but I'd like to. If I know they do that work, I'll ask for a proposal.
And it goes back to staying top of mind for people, knowing what the issues are, what the pain points are, and reminding people. I'll tell you a quick story before we get to the next question. One of my very good friends that I knew from my first day at the law firm, he does litigation work at a firm, and I needed an M&A lawyer. And, I didn't think about him. He's a litigator, right? And so I needed it. It was for a smaller deal. I wasn't going to use any of my very large firm friends, but he happened to text me that day and say, hey, how you doing? I was like, hey, how's it going? He said, reminder, I just went over to this other law firm, and it's a full service firm, and we do litigation, M&A, et cetera. And I was thinking he was still at a litigation boutique. Guess who got the work? His partner, the M&A guy. It happened to be just what we needed. But that's an example of just staying top of mind and reminding people, hey, I'm out here. If you didn't know, I switched firms or practice areas, et cetera, so that when that time comes, they can think of you. And let me go to the Q&A. So Monica asked, we know in-house counsel are busy. Once someone has made an ask, how should we go about follow-ups?
That is such a good question. And it really is so situation dependent. But I think that's part of kind of reading the room a bit. Like, for example, if it's a matter, like, let's say it's something around a litigation matter that you've asked to be a part of, well, that is going to come to a head pretty quickly. So, depending on how close you are with the person, if you make the ask and don't hear anything back, I probably would follow up within a couple of weeks. But all of that is really dependent on the situation and the nature of the relationship. I kind of think that you'll probably know like when feels right based on, the nature of what you asked about and all that. I wouldn't make the ask and then never show your face again. There's got to be a middle ground between that, but it probably is pretty specific on the nature of the situation. Anthony has a more satisfying answer than that.
I mean, yeah, I think if you make an ask and you don't hear back, it's likely, you didn't get the work, but that doesn't mean it's a negative thing. It could just be that we're busy. So again, I wouldn't disappear. I would continue to stay in touch. And if it makes sense, I would just inquire and just say, hey, how'd you make out on that particular matter? Who'd you hire? And just kind of assume and just inquire. So I was thinking about it. Or you're following it along and you've been watching the docket and just follow up that way. And again, these are just more touch points. And I think, because again, I don't think it's intentional. I usually will follow up if someone asks and say, we're going to go with another firm and this is why. But, if you don't follow up immediately after a week or two, you can make the assumption or just follow up and say, what'd you decide to do? And take it from there.
That's such good advice. And maybe you could consider pivoting back to kind of the beginning of the cycle and do something like offering an opportunity for a training, like, let's say it's an employment litigation matter that you made the ask on, they ended up going with a different firm. Well, maybe you could offer like, I know you had that issue over non-competes. If you want me to come in and share some of the current best practices around that once this matter settles down, so you don't have to deal with it again, let me know, something like that.
Another quick tip is, lean back on those relationships. So if you know someone else at the company, maybe that person can shed some light. I've had people reach out to me because I've introduced them to my colleague and the colleague isn't responding. Well, I just know my colleague happens to be very busy and maybe I can just text her and say, hey, did you respond to so-and-so? And she's like, oh, I forgot. And then they get a response too. So that's another way to leverage your relationship to find out what's going on behind the scenes. We have several questions. I'm gonna try to get through them. Some have, I think, already been answered. So I'll go with the ones that maybe haven't. How much does a person's personality affect their introductions pitches? Can you typically gauge sincere and genuine interest in your company and the services your company provides? I assume as opposed to insincere interest or, just reaching out to reach out, but they don't know anything about your company. So who wants to take that one?
I'll take that one. I think, a lot of lawyers do have a good BS meter. It's part of the tools in our toolkit. So I do think that for the most part, we can gauge sincere, genuine interest in the company. Some folks are kind of more used car salesman-y than others, but I think that's where having that good EQ, being able to read the room, and also, when you're pitching, being prepared in that pitch, making sure that the pitch it clearly communicates the value that you and your firm bring. In terms of the person's personality, I think that one thing that seems to make business development a bit challenging is that, like, for so long in our careers, where our legal acumen and our legal expertise is what allows us to get ahead, and then suddenly it seems we have this other skill that we have to develop, which is selling ourselves and selling our firm. And sometimes without programs like this, some folks don't have that expertise or haven't built it up yet. So I do think we take that a little bit with a grain of salt. If we have an antitrust lawyer that's, very, very brainy and maybe not the most affable, we can work with that. But it does go back to, we hire lawyers that we trust and we respect and that we like. And so a personality fit is important. They have to like us and want to work with us, and vice versa.
Perfect. Okay, we need to end, but just one lightning round, because I think this is perfect. You just got to say yes or no, and if anyone wants to know why, you got to reach out to the panelists. So, business cards or no? Yes or no?
No.
Business cards. No. I'm a no. All right, so reach out to find out more. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for the discussion.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank y'all so much. This was an excellent and incredibly informative panel. So we really appreciate your time. And thank you, your input in getting back to these wonderful pitch participants. So thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Good luck, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye.
Everyone.
All right, Jasmine, and you have the next privilege of introducing the next panelist. And we're so excited to have them here. It's another incredible group. So take it away, Jasmine.
Okay, will do. Fantastic. And I am happy to introduce the moderator for our second panel, which is the pitch this evening. So our moderator for this panel is Sean Brown. Sean is the Vice President and Deputy General Counsel of Kimberly-Clark Corporation. She is a celebrated trial attorney who has leveraged that experience to become a trusted and practical business advisor. Sean is the inaugural legal advisor, and she is supporting the global sustainability team, where she partners with internal and external stakeholders with an increased focus on addressing social and environmental challenges as Kimberly-Clark strives to meet its social and environmental goals. Sean is a zealous advocate for equality, specifically gender and racial equity. She serves as the board chair of the Hockaday School and the past board chair for the Texas Women's Foundation. She also supports numerous nonprofit organizations in Texas and the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Sean is an alumna of Southern Methodist University, Pontiac Stangs, where she received both her Bachelor of Science and her JD. Additionally, she has been recognized as a distinguished alumna of both the law school and the university. In her free, and I have lots of thoughts and questions about how she has free time, Sean enjoys running and spending time with her 3 children. And with that, I will give the floor to Sean to introduce our other 2 panelists for the evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine, and thanks to Dallas Women Lawyers Association for hosting this wonderful event. We got to see the problem or the pitch or the mock pitch, I should say, in advance, and I think this is invaluable experience. And so I have the pleasure of really, I would say, initiating what will be a conversation. I won't even call it moderating because both Stephanie and Sarah have such amazing tips, and we had a really great time during the pitch. So I will introduce the other 2 panelists. And so first we have Stephanie Zapata Moore. Stephanie is the Executive Vice President and General Counsel at Vistra, and she is also the Chief Compliance Officer for Vistra. And if you don't know, Vistra is an integrated power company based in Irving, Texas. Stephanie previously served as Vice President and General Counsel of Luminant. And prior to joining Luminant, she was an associate at Gardier, Wynn and Sewell, which is now Foley and Lardner. And she served in the Corporate and Securities Practice Group and focused on M&A and private securities offerings. In addition to overseeing both legal and compliance in the Corporate Secretary Group, her team also includes environmental, health, safety, as well as ensuring timely and efficient delivery of all legal services and the company's compliance and EHS programs. She, of course, engages and is part of the executive management team and engages with the board of directors, and is also a very faithful leader just for that team. Very involved in the community as well. Stephanie is in her first year of a 2-year term as chair of Girls Inc. of Metropolitan Dallas, and she's served as a director since 2016 and as chair of the Nominating and Governance Committee. She's also a member of the Hispanic 100, which is a Dallas-based Latino network of Latina leaders. And she also serves on the advisory council of POTR 25, and I hope I got that right, which is a program of the Hispanic National Bar Association, whose mission is to increase the number of Hispanic attorneys occupying senior positions in corporate legal departments. Stephanie attended Duke for undergrad, and then she received her law degree from William and Mary. And she and her husband live in Dallas and have 3 daughters and a son. And I actually also know Stephanie as a runner. She's faster than me, but we did participate in marathon training together, and she's done a number of marathons. Also welcome Sarah Romine. Sarah, thank you so much for being on this panel. Sarah is Senior Vice President and U.S. General Counsel at Lockton. Lockton is the world's largest privately held insurance brokerage and consulting firm. Prior to joining Lockton, Sarah was in-house counsel at AT&T, and before moving in-house, Sarah was a partner at Carrington Coleman. She also previously served as a law clerk to Judge Katharina Haynes on the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals and Robert L. Hinkle in the Northern District of Florida. Sarah is a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin, and she received her JD from Emory University School of Law. I also had the pleasure of knowing and working with Sarah in several bar Association organizations and also through the We Lead program. I know she's a rock star, and I actually got her location of her company wrong because she just continues to up the game and moved over from AT&T to now lead the legal department for the US at Lockton. So you all are in for a real treat. So Stephanie and Sarah, thank you both for being here. So we will sort of set it off, and what we're going to do, and please feel free to ask questions in the chat. I will endeavor to do like Chastity, although Chastity is so amazing. So I'm going to try to make sure I'm watching it to see if there are questions that you all have. You feel free to ask them throughout, and I may weave them in, and also we'll try to save some room at the end. And we're going to sort of take this through as if you were preparing for all the way through what you might do as you actually present. So the very first question is just really sort of setting the scene. And I recall when I was in your position, one of my questions is, how do you even get to the opportunity of getting to do the pitch? How does your firm either get on a list or get on the radar of any of the general counsel? So maybe Stephanie, I will start with you on that question.
Sure, I'm really happy to be here, and thanks to DWLA for hosting this great program. So we at Vistra, we do not have a quote unquote list. We do have firms that we have worked with in the past and who we are familiar with, but we also try to be really open to choosing the right lawyer for the matter. And that may be at one of our firms that is an incumbent that we've worked with before, but it also may be at another firm. We rely on lawyers within our group. So building relationships, not only, at the senior levels, but all throughout the legal department is one way that we decide on who we're going to ask to pitch or who we might select for a given matter. We also have had times where our business teams have given us ideas and suggestions. When we were preparing for this, one anecdote that I was reminded of was that our development team had attended an industry conference for renewables development and saw a presentation that was being given to business people, but lawyers and 2 law firms were on this panel. And so when they came back, following the rules, they did come to us and say, hey, we'd like to explore using one of these firms that we heard who seems to be knowledgeable. Can you all look into that and see if there's somebody that knows this area? And we ended up selecting one of those firms that we had not worked with previously, just because our business people were paying attention and because these firms and lawyers happen to be taking the time, to go and speak at this event. So we try to be open-minded, but we also do rely, on relationships that we have built over the years and firms that we've worked with in the past, as well as trying to develop new relationships.
Got it. And then Sarah, what about you? And can you speak not only to Lockton, but also maybe some previous experience, just to kind of give a couple of perspectives?
Yeah, so at Lockton, we don't have the same sort of strict list that, for example, AT&T has a preferred counsel program that is, a very defined list of outside law firms that are typically used, and you have to go through a process to get an exception. For Lockton, we have something of, what you might call panel counsel, but it's not as exclusive or strict as some other companies might employ. And obviously the benefit for both sides is that you negotiate rates and sort of expertise, and they're the go-to in your mind. But at the same time, our priority is sort of finding the right lawyer for the right matter. And some of that candidly is just being top of mind when a matter comes in. And I think, if the question is also, how do you get on the list, or how do you get to be front and center? Ask is always a good one. I always think it's good when people ask, like, what can we do to try and work with you? How do we get out in front? And then start the dialogue there, because there's never any harm in asking. And then the second thing, I think, is really kind of showing expertise in a particular area. And, it sounds so basic, and I know a lot of people do it, so it can seem like you're constantly getting inundated with it, but things like showing expertise on LinkedIn or client alerts can often go kind of a long way. And for me, one of the bigger issues is also just referrals from friends, whether that's in-house counsel or former partners of mine, to just say, and so making sure your friends know what you do, so that when they think of you, or when they get asked a question of, do you know anybody who does this in this area or this geography, that you're top of mind.
Yeah, those are all great tips. So, and I'll speak just a little, because we also at Kimberly-Clark have a preferred partner list in terms of our outside counsel. And I do find out sometimes when you have such a list, or you say that to lawyers, there's a couple of different reactions. One of them is sort of kind of defeatist, like, oh, well, I guess there's nothing I can really do to, get there. And the others are the folks that are saying, well, if you have conflicts, or they continue to at least sort of identify a specific expertise, or they ask if there's any areas where those firms don't have any particular expertise. And so I would just suggest to you to not sort of take it as a door being closed if a company has a list. And even Sarah mentioned there is an exception process. And so obviously, there would have to be a particularized need in order to do that. But if you do have unique skill set or a particular area where you're, focused, or just continuing to watch the business and being there. And Stephanie, I think you actually during our prep session kind of talked about Winter Storm Uri maybe, and a lawyer that had worked with you guys. So maybe if you could share that with the group too.
Yeah, so during Winter Storm Uri, obviously our company and the whole state was in a bit of turmoil with the power being out and the grid kind of struggling. And one of our outside lawyers that we had worked with in the past, but not, a ton, he just reached out and sent an email to me and to the Deputy General Counsel saying, hey, I know you guys are going through a lot right now. I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about you. And if I can do anything to help, just please let me know. And it wasn't an ask for anything specific. But within, a day, as we started to figure out what are all the legal work streams that we need to be thinking about, and what are all the issues and kind of things that might be coming at us in the wake of this event, we called him and said, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. And he was really the only person that thought to do this. And immediately, as soon as we launched into doing work related to Uri, he was on that team. We were involving him in interviews. And we have been working with him. I was just talking to someone today. It's, 3 years, a little over 3 years since Winter Storm Uri. And we still have weekly calls about the various work streams that have been ongoing since then. So just kind of being attuned to situations that may be impacting your client, specifically, or the industry that they're in, and just letting people know, and of course it has to be genuine, but that you are there to help, and that you are thinking about and understanding what they're going through.
Yeah, and in that vein, maybe Sarah, for you first, and Steph, if you have anything to add, how do the emails from the courthouse news, emails that all the firm lawyers get, and they're sort of like, hey, I saw you got sued in this particular case, or I read about some deal that you were doing, how do those kind of reach outs land when they come to your inbox?
So I'll say I generally appreciate them. There are times they become overwhelming because you're like, okay, I know we got sued, and now 50 lawyers have sent you the breaking news, the CNS dinger, and like, okay, yes, no surprises. But I've changed the decision that I was making in terms of who to hire based on sort of the approach that at least one lawyer had. So in my view, it is by using one of those. And so in my view, it's better if you're going to send one of those, that instead of just saying, hey, you got sued in LA and we have an LA office, which is not the most persuasive of pitches in my view. But if you're saying, hey, you got sued in LA, I noticed this, you've been assigned to Judge Broadbelt, and Judge Broadbelt, I tried a case in front of him, last year, my partner did, and we have extensive expertise in this. I don't know if you've considered your defense, but like, have you thought about these things? And we have like a very good track record on this type of issue in front of this type of court. And so if you're able to give like a nuanced pitch for why, you know, that either demonstrates that you know the judge, you know the opposing counsel, or you have experience in that venue, that is helpful to me. I mean, I can think of at least one example where I was planning on engaging one law firm and somebody else kind of came in and said, here's what you need to know about this side and this venue. And it was like, okay, you know your stuff. And I'd rather have somebody with the inside track who has a proven track record. So I think it's a good opportunity. It also makes it so you're top of mind, because I mean, I know it sounds arbitrary, but there are just times where when you get sued, it's, you know, you're thinking, okay, who do I want to hire? And at that moment, you're racking your brain. And so having somebody who is kind of front and center is very helpful.
Stephanie, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with that, and had a similar story where we had kind of an incumbent from a company that we had acquired. So they had done a lot of work, and it was a class action that we were sued in a class action. And they, I think, kind of assumed, oh, well, these are the kinds of things we had done for the company that you acquired. We have the history, we'll be the ones to do it. But another attorney reached out more with a pitch like Sarah was describing, where they said, hey, here's a case that I tried that had the same lawyers, plaintiff's lawyers on the other side. It's in the same venue. Here's how we handled it. And I took a look at what they're alleging, and it seems very similar. And here's some ideas about how you might approach it. And that firm, the second firm, had done some work, even say like a year before this, where they had come in to meet with us. They were opposite us, or actually kind of aligned with us on one of these Winter Storm Uri cases, but not representing us directly. And we had seen that they had done good work, and they said, hey, we'd just like to come meet you. So we had that established from them coming to talk with us and have lunch with us a year ago. And then when they sent and said, hey, we actually have experience with these lawyers, knowing what their playbook is, we ended up hiring them. And I think the other incumbent firm was kind of surprised, but that's another, you know, lesson of not becoming too complacent or kind of confident that you're going to get the work. You always do have to be explaining why you're still the best person to handle that work.
Yeah, that's a good takeaway. Kind of don't take it for granted. Okay, so let's move to the pre-work, right? So, you know, this is all of the things that you think could be helpful or persuasive as lawyers are getting ready or prepared to come in for that pitch meeting. And so, you know, what can you do in terms of research? How do you plan the presentation? Who's in the room? Who speaks? How's it run? Maybe kind of walk through that. Sarah, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the research that goes in on the front end is incredibly important. So knowing, you know, knowing what the company does, like there's the basics. Knowing, you know, are they publicly traded or are they private? Understanding, you know, the industry. There's all sorts of things I think there that are sort of the low-hanging fruit. I'm a big fan too of whoever got you in the door for the pitch, reaching out to them and saying, hey, can you just tell me, what are the top 5 things that you're worried about right now? Like, what are your most pressing legal issues? And then making sure you've tailored the pitch to those, you know, to the client and what their needs are. So you're not pitching, you know, something that just simply isn't applicable or is just not what they're most likely to be hiring from. I think a lot of people have heard me say this before, but I'm a big believer that if you're in the room, you're in the room for a reason. And so don't just bring bodies, bring active speakers and bring energy. And, you know, you can't, if you've got people who are just sitting there like potted plants, that from our perspective, I think that looks like that's what you can expect either, you know, in terms of the staffing and also the energy. And so, you know, you want to make it so that it's not too much of a formalistic, I think, of like every person speaks, but just making sure that you're cognizant of showing value for everyone who participates. So I kind of pause there, but I think those are kind of high level where I would start.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And one kind of funny thing, so our name is Vistra, so it's vision and tradition. That's how we came up with this name, Vistra. I cannot tell you the number of people that come in to pitch us or to talk with us about work that say Vistra. And when they say it, it's like everybody in the room, especially if, our CEO or other senior leaders are in there, and I can just see them like kind of tensing up, thinking, oh my gosh, this person who's here to talk to us doesn't even know how to pronounce our company name. So I do think it's a little tongue in cheek, but I do think that, knowing what your client's business is, knowing how to pronounce their name, is important. It just shows that you're interested in what they do, that you understand what they do, and that's part of like selling how you're going to add value. I also agree on not just like bringing 50 people into a room. That is going to show us that maybe you're going to overstaff the case, work the file. We're going to have to spend a lot of time trying to understand who's doing what. It doesn't show kind of cohesion and expertise. It just shows like you're throwing a lot of people at it. And I think just, again, like you said, Sarah, understanding what the needs are, so that if it's not a specific matter, if you're just coming in on a general representation, having that conversation beforehand to understand what it is how you can help, so that when you come in, you're explaining how you can help and not just kind of fumbling around thinking about all the possible ways you actually have something kind of specific and tangible.
I think those are all really good tips. One of the things I would probably double click on is, oh my gosh, somebody's at my door, so y'all might be able to hear my dog going crazy. Sorry. But to double click on the research of the company, and either if they're a public company, like reading corporate filings, understanding like their most recent earnings, looking at what issues the company is facing if they've had to restate, and then also I really like people who kind of incorporate your company's mission into what you don't want to get too cutesy with it or too tongue in cheek, but there's definitely opportunities to sort of like say how you're going to align with or enhance that. And I'm so sorry, they are not going to stop, so I'm gonna have to go do this for 1 second. I'll leave y'all with a question, because there was one thing I had, remember when we prepped, we talked about you're the person who maybe has the relationship, but you're not the person who has the expertise. And so how have you seen that handled in a good way that sort of still, leverages maybe your relationship, but, plays on the person who actually has the knowledge?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one of just like, even if you're the person who got the foot in the door, and then there's, but you're pitching, like I use the example of if I were still at Carrington Coleman and the pitch was over, patent prosecution, nobody wants to hear me talk about that because I don't know what I'm talking about. It can only go poorly. And so, if it's you understand that the relationship is what got you there, the trust that your client or prospective client has in you, that's what brought you to that moment. But your team has to sort of rise and fall on their own. And so my view is you want to get out of the way in the pitch and be the person who's both making sure that the pitch is tailored on the front end and then can get the feedback on the back end. But otherwise, let your team stand on their own, and it shows confidence. It shows it allows you to showcase the expertise. And so, to me, that's kind of the most power flex somebody can do, is just say, let them talk and stop.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think just kind of a quick, I'm Stephanie Moore. I'm here because I have worked on a board with Sean Brown. But the real people you need to hear from are our experts who I've brought with me. My partner, Sarah Romine, is going to talk to you, about X. And that way people know why you're there, and they know the relationship that you have, but you quickly kind of hand it off to the expert who's going to actually be handling the matter.
Yeah, and I think that's just so helpful, because you're not going to be the expert on everything, but it, to Stephanie, to your point, it gives you the opportunity to not be the potted plant like Sarah described, but also recognize that the firm has expertise that can be beneficial, even if that's not you. And I actually find that to also be confident that, you know, you're identifying that you may not have to be the person to do that work, but you're bringing the folks along. So obviously you'll want to have educated them on the company culture, the people that you know, talk to your person who's in. Okay, so a quick question about swag, because I did hear the last panel ended on business cards or no. What are your thoughts about cute giveaways, flash drives, pins, t-shirts, hats, or whatever else people come up with?
Like, thumbs down. I mean, I have a lot of it. And so I don't know that it adds much, if anything, to the pitch. I think it's more about, you know, the expertise that you have. The same thing for like printed out books or PowerPoints or anything like that. I mean, I think I just want to have a conversation and hear from you. If there's something that you want to email maybe in advance for us to have, that, I think that's fine, but I definitely don't need anything kind of physically given to us. It ends up just in the recycling. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Especially, I mean, one of the best pitches I ever heard was when I was going through Chicago on business and just, you know, had reached out to a law firm about expertise they had. But by the same token, at the end, you know, they're like, "Hey, we brought you these gifts," and I'm like, "I've got a carry-on," and like, I'm not abandoning my shoes to put like these 2 wine glasses, you know, in the carry-on. So, you know, and so it was a great gesture, but it's also just sort of, you know, you got to think about the practical. You know, are you asking somebody to like lug some stuff? And at this point, you know, I think this like less is more.
Very good. Okay. All right. So let's talk about in the room. And I'd like for you to think about, you know, some of the really good pitches that you've seen and what made them good, or some ones that didn't go so well and what made them bad. And we did, and I think this is related, get a question in the chat about a preference on how to start the pitch. Is it a personal story? Is it an anecdote? Something fun? So maybe sort of considering that context on what happens in the room. Stephanie, we'll start with you.
yeah, so I think establishing, you know, the context of what has brought you there, I think is key and a good way to start. You know, I'm Stephanie Moore. I'm here today because, you know, you have been sued and I had a case that was exactly the same. And I want to tell you about how that turned out and how we helped that client. You know, something that kind of connects to why you're there and how you can help. I think that, you know, things that I've seen that are really good are things where they come with very specific, you know, if it's a lawsuit, they come with ideas. I've read the suit. I think we have these claims. I think we have these defenses. You know, whatever it is that shows they've done the pre-work and they know the matter and they have the expertise to handle it. I think kind of things that have not worked is more, you know, we go around the room and everybody says, I'm so-and-so, I went to law school here, I've been working for this long, you know, I've done this kind of work. You know, they're just kind of giving you this personal history. We can read that on the bio and in advance. And it's really just, you know, people's time is not, we don't have, you know, endless amounts of time. And so I think getting in and establishing, like, let's talk about, you know, have you thought about this? You know, who are going to be your witnesses? Who are have you started a legal hold? Like, just kind of practical things that kind of get you into the meat and potatoes of what it is that you're there to talk about, I think are good.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, like, I love when somebody just gives a roadmap to, like, this is what we're going to do. So, you know, like walking in the pitch before, you know, so you don't get bogged down in the cumbersome, like, you know, this is so-and-so and let's all go around the table and, you know, introduce ourselves, but to just kind of come in surgically to say, like, hey, we're so glad to have the time. Here's how we're going to hit it. So-and-so and so-and-so are going to talk about your litigation needs. We noticed that you've got a lot of this type of litigation. They're going to handle that. This is our data privacy, you know, and security person who understands that you deal with a lot with PHI. So they're like our HIPAA compliance expert. You know, then we've got this team over here, that if you're ever engaged in transactions, it's the right team. And that's how it's going to go. And so it gives you kind of like a clear comfort of you have an agenda, and you've also woven in, like, I understand your business needs. And so, I mean, for me, like, high energy is a must. Like, you got to figure out a way to bring the heat, because otherwise, I mean, the pitch always just, it'll feel longer to people than it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, Sarah, just real quick, Sean, that once you give them a roadmap too, that allows them to say, you know what, I know that you were going to get to this point, but do you mind if we go right there? Because I have some questions, or that's really what I'm interested in right now. So when you tell them whoever, kind of quickly who everybody is and what they're going to cover, that's also a way for you to get an insight into what they want to talk about.
Yeah, that's really good, because otherwise you spend 45 minutes on all this other stuff, and then you finally get to that point, but you're potentially out of time. Another thing I notice is how the team interacts, right? And, because if this is a group that you're going to have to work with, it's awkward if it's a little stiff or stilted. And so I do think it's important, you don't want it to be too scripted, but it's nice to sort of practice and think about how you're going to pass the conversation to one another, or be open to, the client as we do our roadmap and we go steps 1 through 6. If they're most interested in 4, let's just pivot to person number 4 who's going to address that topic and be ready to go there. So I thought that was good. So Stephanie, I'm feeling so all of us, you've had both litigation and corporate, obviously. Sarah and I were very heavy litigation. So can you address it also in thinking about like deals and transactions, where if we have any M&A lawyers on the line who are, not wanting to hear about us talking about the CNS news reports or what have you. And I know you probably do that some as well, Sarah, but Stephanie, kind of maybe starting with you, and then Sarah, if you want to have anything to add.
Yeah, so transactions are interesting because you don't have a way of really knowing what people are going to be working on, right? So it's more that you have to kind of generally pitch, hey, if you have transactional work, here's the kind of expertise that we have. This is, finding out something like, for example, in our industry right now, electricity, data centers are huge. And so everybody, has a data center practice, but coming out and saying, I've been following your industry. I know that people are looking at how much more electricity is going to be needed to support all of these data centers that are going to be, springing up, and AI and everything else. I'd really like to just come talk to you about our capabilities in that area and the data center, Bitcoin, related things that we've done. And kind of coming in because, when something new is happening in an industry, we don't know how that's going to go. We don't have experience doing that. It's new for everybody. And so being able to come in and say, we have this experience, or here's how you might want to think about it. And they may or may not be ready to do a deal right then, but it allows you to show that, hey, when they think about their next deal, they might be willing to give you a look. The other thing I think you can do is follow deals that they are closing. So if you see they just acquired a company, reaching out to say, hey, I saw that you guys just did this amazing deal. I'd love to just talk to you so that we might get a look in your next transaction, but it looks like you did a great deal, and we'd really just like to, visit with you about what went well, what could have gone better, just things like that. So I think it's just keeping up again with what is happening in the industry for those potential clients, what is happening that they're actually doing, and then keeping your ear to the ground. There's a lot, sometimes there are processes that are going on where companies are trying to sell various things and they're asking a bunch of bidders to come in. If you're getting wind of those kinds of things, reaching out, hey, I don't know if you guys are in this process, but we heard that so-and-so is trying to sell these power plants, up in the Northeast. Have you guys heard about that? Or are you in that? Do you need information about it? Just kind of trying to stay relevant and topical. And then it's really bringing the team, thinking through what are all the areas that are going to be needed to be addressed in this transaction. And one other tip I would give is sometimes you may not, and we do this a lot on transactions where we might be using firm A for the nitty gritty M&A work, but then we might be using firm B for regulatory expertise in, certain markets. And so I think recognizing what you have internally or where you may need to augment, hey, we can do all the transactional work, but I bet you guys have a regulatory firm that you use all the time in this area of the country. And we'd love to partner with them because they probably know your business very well, and being willing to kind of work across different firms, I think can also be really helpful.
That's good. Thank you. Is there anything to add on the transactional side?
Not a ton. We don't do a lot of big deals domestically in the US. And so I do, but I echo Stephanie's comment, like we're merging two of our entities right now, and it is, which is, only an internal transaction, but even still like triggers a lot of different kind of legal needs. And I think understanding the industry and kind of the other offshoots of work that kind of come with it is incredibly important. I mean, especially on things like tax consequences of, particular things, which is something I wish I never had to deal with, but always have to deal with. And I think it's a good opportunity when you see activity in the industry or you see activity within one of your clients, like being able to recognize. I saw a note on the chat, but like cross-selling opportunities of like, even if it's not on like the immediacy of the deal that's already underway, it's the, hey, we know these things kind of come up, and as an LLC, you have certain issues with, the tax structure. So, here, let me tell you about both the people we have that can advise on this issue, but also the regulatory issue. It's a really, I mean, in my view, even if you've learned of a deal that's already in progress, you can kind of get some of the aftermath of it.
Got it. And so that's really helpful. And we've kind of been coming at this with a very particularized approach. Like there's a matter, there's a transaction, there's a piece of litigation, but there's also some times where people are like, hey, I'd just like you to come and meet some folks at our firm or learn about who we are as a firm, what we do, and those general pitches, so to speak. How do you approach those? And then I did see a question in the chat who's asking a question about how you cross-sell. So we kind of talked about that a little bit on the specific matter when you're not the person, but let's say it's just firm ABC wants to come talk to you and you've given them audience. What's the best way to handle those types of generic kind of general pitch, get to know you? Sarah, we can start with you.
Yeah, those are tough, although the lights go out in my office. I think the challenge there is to still tailor them. So even though you don't have a matter, my belief is the best of those sort of generic capabilities are ones where you're prioritizing. So instead of just saying these are the laundry list of services our firm offers, you're saying these are the capabilities we have. We want to focus on these two because those appear to be priorities of you. And so in using kind of what research you've done to be able to showcase those, I think is important. Ideally, you'll have some kind of nuanced idea. I think the misses are where people try to be too broad, and and you really got to focus on like what sets your firm apart. And like litigation boutiques, to me, like those pitches are almost always kind of easier because it's surgical. This is what we do. We're not going to try and pitch your other business, but I want you to think of us on these three things. Or, like certain regulatory, there are certain like regulatory experts where, they're like, we're not interested in your litigation work. I'm not interested in that. Here's what I want you to think of us for. And so, the challenge, I think, is kind of creating a lasting impression, and you have to be more precise over it than simply we're a full service firm. And if you're going to be doing the full service firm pitch, then, maybe go all in on like, we've got offices everywhere you could possibly look. And so if you're looking for continuity, that's why we're your Huckleberry. It's like, it's got to be, this is the full universe. And it's just like, we don't have conflicts and we can get your needs in. Latin America and Asia, you know, and all of that. But I think even still, you want to have some specifics that are pretty well tailored.
Yeah, I agree with that, Sarah, because, you know, any full service firm is going to be able to do all of the nuts and bolts, and it's finding that kind of area that is unique, that's going to set you apart, that is the key. And I think acknowledging, you know, hey, if you ever needed capital markets counsel, or, you know, just whatever these general things are, we can do all of that. And then I know a lot of firms now are setting up kind of industry practice groups. And so clearly, you know, if you're pitching a hospitality company, you want to bring your hospitality people, even if they're litigators or transactional lawyers, but for them to kind of speak the same lingo with the client. And you can get in, you know, everybody understands that if you're a national or global firm, that you're going to be able to handle things all over the place in every area. But it's kind of finding that that unique area that's going to set you apart, that I think is key.
Yeah, I agree. And I would add that I would still, I like the idea, Sarah, that you had about sort of tailoring it. And even if it's intended to be generic, and then I think the way to tailor it, or a way to tailor it, Stephanie, even if your firm doesn't have an industry group, is again, research on the organization. So we see in the last 10 years, you've had these types of transactions. It looks like you've had active M&A activity in this area. Geographically, our firm is positioned to help you because of X, or we saw that you had this same type of class action, or you battled this, or you had a recall, or you're in the consumer space. We know these are issues that are problematic or can be of concern for that type of company. This is how we can help. Let us give you some examples. And I think that's helpful to think about as you're putting together the team for the generic pitch, is to really identify sort of what that area looks like for those organizations. So okay, so let's go to the decision. And we do have time for, thank you for those who put questions in the chat, and please continue to do so. As I said, we'll end in about 10 minutes to the hour to see if there's additional questions. But as you get to the decision, sort of what is the thing that sways you, that says it's this firm and this is the one that we need to determine? And I think oftentimes that has, you know, external factors. There's the relationship with the company. Have you worked with them before? There's the expertise, but, you know, kind of how do you go about as a legal team making that call, and then what sways the decision? Stephanie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so one recent experience that we had was related to data center work. That's all the rage right now in the electricity industry. And we had asked 3 firms to provide capabilities, and then we set up calls quickly with them to try to talk through what was going on. So 2 of the firms who we have done work with in the past responded like very quickly, got us their pitch book, you know, email by email. They said we can set up a call, you know, in the next day, and got all the people on the team on the call. And so we worked through those quickly. And the third firm, who has worked with our regulatory group, but not necessarily with us directly in the legal department previously, they took like a week to get us this pitch book. And so by the time we had received their pitch book, we had already decided we're choosing one of the other firms because this is going quickly. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes it's, you know, the circumstances around how the pitch is presented, timeliness. Generally, what we'll do to try to make the decision is everybody who's participated in a meeting or who's going to be working on the team, you know, that has an opportunity to kind of talk to the groups, if that's the way we're doing it. We'll say, hey, what did you think? You know, who we also think about in this case, the 2 firms that were fast to respond. One of them, we decided that we're going to use on a different transaction. And so we said, okay, well, they're going to be kind of covered up with this other transaction. So we'll go with this other firm on this data center project. And so I think some of it is kind of moving the work around. But we do try to involve the people who are going to be managing the work internally. We try to involve the clients, to an extent, to make sure if they have a strong view about who ought to be involved or who they would like to work with, that we take that into account as well. And then just really especially if it's a new person, if they're bringing kind of a rate, they're willing to invest in us or in getting to know the matter. I've heard firms say, well, look, we'll give you $10,000 just for us to kind of get up to speed on the company and this area of the company, free of charge, since we're new to representing you. We'll invest our own time to really get to know you without charging you for that. So I think there's ways to kind of show that you're invested in partnering with this client. Again, especially when you're new, or this might be one of the first matters that you're working on.
Sarah?
I have so many thoughts on this issue. I'm trying to organize them in my head. I think the first thing I would say is I hired the lawyer, not the firm. And, I think everyone hears that, but I think it's incredibly important to understand that it's, for me, it's almost always a trust factor. It is who do I think and who can I look at that I know is going to be somebody that I can hold accountable, who's going to be responsive and who's hungry for the work. And so it gets back to like the sort of avoid complacency, don't take things for granted. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that my business people lose sleep over. And I want to make sure, I'm doing my job, so I've got the right person for the right role. And, that means like if I'm hiring Marisa, I want Marisa. It means, and when it counts, right? Now, it doesn't mean like she needs to do all of, the whatever, all of the grunt work, but it means when it comes to who I'm trusting and who I'm looking to for answers, I want to have some level of comfort that I'm going to get the right person. And so, from a pitch perspective, you know your colleagues, and are they true partners, and do you have the person in the room who's going to answer your client's call and think of it as their own client? And because that's so important for the relationship. And the other thing I think of for all my like Peloton peeps is the whole, how you do anything is how you do everything. And it is like, it's so easy to break that trust, whether, to Stephanie's point, it's on a small matter, where you're giving somebody a test, or if it's even on how you're responding to the pitch and like, how organized are you, and how timely are you? Because we're constantly, we put our reputations on the line with who we hire. Most of my business people don't know our outside lawyers from Adam or or Eve for that matter, and what they want to know is what the result is and what the cost is. And so it's, for me, it's that trust factor at the end of the day. Rates and all of that other stuff do matter, but it's, I don't want to get what I'm paying for if it's like it's so low that it's not going to be important, it's not going to be a partnership.
That's a really good point on the rates, because I think that's, folks are always focused on, well, how do I come in as the lowest or the best from a cost effectiveness perspective? But it really is the value and not the rate, right? So really, really good points. Okay, so I don't see any more questions in the chat. I do have a few takeaways for us, but maybe as folks are thinking, I'll ask you guys this, which is not a pitch specific question, but it's kind of what I like to call like random acts of dinner or random acts of lunch. So, sometimes it's not the big meeting in the boardroom with the 3 or 4 people from the legal team, but it's somebody who said, hey, let's, go together and have lunch or grab coffee. And I think, Sarah, it was you, one of the very first things you said was ask. But there's so many times where, and it may be just from somebody who I knew or I'm friends with, or I met through some other organization or involvement, but they don't ask. Also, sometimes people overly, like aggressively ask. So you know, what have you seen that's effective or helpful in those types of situations where it's a bit more casual, there's a bit of sort of, you know, a social aspect to it, but it's still business at its core, that really is, you know, doesn't cross the line, but also at least gets the point across that they're trying to actually do business with you.
I don't know. I mean, I come back to be hungry, but don't be entitled. Be humble and, you know, want to and recognize like there are a lot of lawyers out there. There's a lot of good lawyers. I mean, there are a lot of people I really want to work with. And it's you know, I do think sometimes it's nice to be persistent because it's easy to get lost in the day-to-day. But I have seen pitches go horribly awry in those social settings where people are like, why haven't you hired me? Or like, why would you choose that firm instead of like us? And, you know, tone is everything. And it's like, you know, and just kind of also understanding, you know, what the life of an in-house lawyer is like. I thought I understood it before I went in-house. I totally did not. Just the nature of the two, like drinking from the fire hose and how you just, you know, you're going to be making decisions with significant consequences on really short notice. And like, you know, there's just, that's the life. I don't know, Stephanie, you.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it all has to be, you know, it's this building of a relationship, which I agree, asking and not doing it in a pushy way, but more in a, you know, I'd really love to work with you. If we can find the right matter, you know, just keep me in mind and, you know, kind of, again, keeping attuned to what's going on either in that industry with that company, and just kind of keeping that contact, right? This example that I gave about somebody that we hired for this class action, this lunch that we went to, which really had no agenda, it was that we had seen him argue before an appellate court and we thought he's really good and he knew someone in our department. So he's like, hey, I'd love to come from Houston, take you guys to lunch. And that was a year ago. And there was no agenda. It wasn't like, hey, how can I work with you guys? It was just, he wanted to just get to know us. And so kind of thinking about this as it really is the building of relationships. And again, you know, just asking, I think is right and appropriate. In the sense of, you know, I really think I can help you. I really would like to work with you and find a way. But again, not being kind of pushy or demanding or entitled.
Yeah.
And I think be creative too, and seeking opportunities. Like I've seen some of the best relationships formed over small matters, you know, where even, you know, we all know kind of behind the scenes, maybe the law firm's taking a loss on the short term of just like, you know, doing an alternative fee agreement up front. But if it gets you the relationship and you're betting on yourself to be able to cement that relationship and show value, I mean, I think it pays off.
Yeah. Yeah. Every matter is the most important matter at the time, right? Okay, so I do see a few questions in the Q&A. One of them is, what's the sweet spot for the length of time for the pitch? So we actually didn't cover that. What do you guys think about that?
I think no more than an hour, maybe even shorter if you can, 30 minutes. I mean, probably the people you're going to be meeting with are have busy calendars. So the more kind of targeted and efficient that you can be, I think the better.
Yeah, I would say it depends on if there's food. But otherwise, I agree with Stephanie. Right. If it's over lunch or a breakfast, you can get to an hour.
Yeah.
Maybe a little longer.
What about in-person versus virtual? I know we talked about that in the prep and we didn't address that here.
I prefer in-person, just to be honest with you. I think there's something sort of tangible about it, but I've seen some pitches do really well virtually. I just think less people. I think you get even less people in virtual for it to succeed. And the hybrid's also an option. Like I've seen some of those do well, but it's hard, you know, if you're like the solo person on the screen and you're like 3x the size of everybody else in the room behind people. I've seen that be super awkward. You know, so it just sort of depends, I think, on the structure of the room.
Yeah, and I think flexibility to whatever the potential client prefers. And then what I would also say, we were talking about this on the prep call, if you're doing virtual, maybe find a way to suggest that everybody do it from their computer or their iPad so that everybody's the same size, versus we get in these Teams rooms and you've got people on a huge screen, and then you can't see the people that are in the room look like these little tiny, stick figures, and you can't tell who's talking or anything like that. So try to find a way where it's interactive for everybody, regardless of if it's virtual or hybrid or in person or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, and I prefer in person. Virtual can work, but I have a war story, or maybe it's a horror story of a virtual pitch, because I think where people, they decide if it's virtual, they can invite everybody that could possibly participate. And that is where it's gone wrong, because it's like 20 Brady Bunch squares on the screen, and everybody can only talk for like 3 minutes. And you already oftentimes don't know some of these folks because they're not in person with you. And it just was overwhelming. And so I got a whole bunch of, I felt like I was at a wedding reception where you have like 5-minute conversations with everybody, and you really didn't get to know anybody. And so I do think in the virtual space, if that becomes either, everyone participates and you sort of try to limit the virtual, the number of people, or if you're gonna have like 1 or 2 people be virtual, just try to figure out how to make that the most interactive as possible, like you said, Stephanie. And then one other question was, how do you balance the cost of the firm services versus the expertise of the firm in choosing who will get your business? And I'm guessing this is probably also kind of geared towards, law firm rates, like, I can't believe some of the partner rates right now. And also even associate rates, especially first-year associate rates who haven't even passed the bar. And there are the bet the company matters. There are I need the super expertise, surgical, only 2 people in the country do this. And then there's a whole bunch of other work in between. And so, what's the best way that you've seen firms really address that, the expensive nature of legal services and trying to partner with you?
So a couple different ways. I think one thing is being really mindful of the bills. And so, we do spend a lot of time reviewing bills, trying to figure out, is this staffed appropriately? Is someone, spending too much time? And so I think like having a mindset of, I am going to manage and shepherd and steward this matter the same way I would if I was paying the bill, and having that critical eye when you're reviewing things and when you're staffing things. I think making sure that you're communicating with the client as you're bringing new people onto the matter. Why is that happening? If it's kind of newer attorneys that are just coming in, investing your own money to say, I'm going to have this person spend 10 hours getting up to speed that I'm not going to charge you for, kind of making sure that you're communicating there. And then I think looking at fee arrangements, when we do try to do ours annually, and it's the least favorite thing that I do in my job, but partnering in terms of whether it's holding rates flat from the year before, whether it's offering volume discounts. I think there's just different ways to do it, but I think recognizing and just being upfront with like, look, I understand, you're running a business and a P&L. I'm involved in a business and a P&L, and finding the ways where you can work together and just being transparent about it as much as possible.
Yeah, I think those were good. Okay, we have 1 minute left and we had one question. So Sarah, I may just pitch that second question to you before we wrap up, which is, how do you add your own personal touch to making your pitch stand out?
Oh, that's a good one. And I think it's you be you, it's and that's the hardest thing, I think, for people to learn or accept. But bring personality, like I don't think, and it gets back at like the potted plant, but whatever it is, I mean, and how showcasing your expertise. I mean, ultimately what your goal is to build not just win the matter, but win the relationship and develop a long-term relationship. And so it's got to be good for both sides, right? Like you want to enjoy who you work with, which includes your in-house counsel. And so I think, just being yourself and letting your personality show is one of the best things that a lawyer can do. Like, don't try to be funny if you're not funny, but like, if you're funny, like go for it. I love a good laugh. But I think you just gotta be comfortable in your own skin, and that in turn projects confidence.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Sarah, for your comments. And thanks to DWLA for having us. Hopefully this was helpful insight and information, and you got some good takeaways.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Stephanie. You gave some really, brilliant pieces of advice that I think our panelists are really going to be able to, or excuse me, our participants are really going to be able to use moving forward as they kind of craft their pitches and get ready for the big event on the 30th. So your insight was invaluable. Thank you all so much for your time and input. We really, really appreciate it on behalf of DWLA. And I'll release you now into your evening, but we really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being friends of DWLA and just great stewards for women in the Dallas legal community. We really appreciate all your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, so pitch participants, that concludes the educational portion. I am now going to kick it over to our other co-VP of Attorney Development, Jennifer Ryback, who is amazing, and she is also our kind of logistical czar for the event on the 30th, the pitch event. She is going to run through kind of some logistics and tips for success and organization for that actual event. And then we can open it up for questions. And if you have logistics questions about the actual pitch event, please put them in the chat. We will do our best to answer those. So with that, Jennifer, take it away.
Hey, all right. I wish we could see all of you. I know Stephanie and I had the pleasure of kind of hosting the Lunch and Learn a couple weeks ago, and we were just so impressed, or maybe it was last week. I don't know, they run together. We were just so impressed by all of you, as we were when we looked at the applications as they were coming in. This is really a great group, and so I hope you will take advantage of the opportunity to participate, one, and then two, to really network with your fellow participants, because this group is going places. So just some reminders, if you didn't come to the Lunch and Learn, I want to kind of hit some of the logistical things that we talked about, and then please throw questions in the chat, and we will, hopefully our goal is by the time you sign off here soon, you will feel really confident and ready for next week. So, of course, we will be at the Arts District Mansion. We will start at 2 p.m. We have not built a great buffer if you are running late. So please make your plans to be there at 2. We will have just a really brief grace period for you to get there and to get ready. We will launch right into our cross-selling section. And I think we'll share our cross-selling lineup with you here soon, their bios and everything, but it's going to be a really great team. And that is not a performative moment in the day. That is just these two fantastic attorneys who have kind of done the cross-selling thing successfully are going to talk to you about that. So nothing for you to prepare in advance for that first session. Just sit back and relax and enjoy what they have to say. For right after that, we will have a 30-minute break for you guys to, freshen yourself, prepare your last-minute notes or review of the mock company profile, answer a quick work email that you might have missed in the first little bit. 30-minute break, just however you need to use it to get ready for the rest of the afternoon. And then we will split you, actually when you check in, we will assign you to either group 1 or group 2. Nothing to worry about for today, but essentially one group will stay in our first space. And then another group will go and start their formal pitches. And so the group that stays in the first space will do the elevator pitch portion. And so just so you can kind of prepare yourself for what that will look like logistically, we will have round tables. Once we finish the cross-selling portion, our in-house folks will start to check in. We will assign them. So literally at your round table, it will be every other chair. It will be one of you, a participant, and an in-house counsel, and a participant and an in-house counsel, just mixed at the rounds. We will time very quick elevator pitch sessions. So we'll say go, you'll turn to whoever is next to you, and kind of give if I were seated next to him or her at a charity lunch or met them on an airplane or whatever, this is my spiel. So obviously less formal than, your formal pitch presentation that you'll be given, definitely shorter, but just that quick, if I were stuck in an elevator with someone important, what would I tell them? We will do all of the timekeeping for you. So we'll tell you, okay, time's up, time to switch. Before you switch, you will get a very short bit of real-time feedback from that in-house lawyer. So, hey, thought you did this great. I love you eventually told me that you did XYZ. I wish you would throw that in the front, or whatever the feedback is. You'll get that quick feedback. We'll switch. You'll do another round. We'll do as many rounds of those as we have time for in that hour session. And then the folks who are in the formal pitch session, you will be led to a breakout room. So other parts of the Arts District Mansion, there will be 3 to 4 in-house counsel in that room. And that's where you will do your formal pitch. Just so everybody is on the same page in terms of those logistics, all the participants will enter the room at the same time. So everyone will sit in the room, in-house counsel will be, across the table. You all will stay in there as your fellow participants give their pitches. You guys can decide on order. We're not going to mandate that. But you'll get to hear, part of the benefit of that is you may pick up something from someone. Oh, I liked this style. I liked the way they did this. So you'll get to see your fellow participants give their pitch. So that is the formal pitch process. Just like the elevator pitches, the formal pitches are longer, but you will get immediate feedback. So you'll give your pitch, you will, kind of conclude, and then you will get a little bit of feedback from the in-house team that is there in the pitch room with you. So once we finish both of those sessions, it's an hour long. Each group will switch. So if you did the speed elevator pitch first, you will go into a breakout room and do your formal pitch, and vice versa. We'll have a short passing period, so to speak, make sure everybody gets where they need to get, and then we'll do round 2. So like I said, if you did one the first time, you'll switch and do the other one. And then, you'll go through that in the same manner that we talked about before. And then we'll conclude with the fun part, the social pitches, which it's a cocktail reception. The goal is kind of using what we've talked about today and what you'll learn, on the day of. You might use some of your cross-selling that you learn. If I'm in the group with Jasmine and we're kind of working the room together, we might practice some of that. Like, oh, you should call Jasmine when you have a franchise issue. You should, we might do some of that. Or, you might use it, you might work the room solo, however you want to do it. Sort of the goal of the happy hour, it's to have fun and to celebrate what will hopefully be a really positive and productive day, but also just one last bit of how you might network with in-house counsel. I think that is the run of the day. Are there questions? Please throw them in the chat if there are. Also, if the chat's not working for you or whatever, please feel free to email any one of us, if you have a question beforehand, and we'll let you know. Yeah, I don't see any questions. Am I forgetting anything, Stephanie?
I don't see any questions either. I do want to reiterate, I think you hit it. There might be one. Yeah, how long for the elevator pitch and the pitch?
Oh.
The elevator pitch, that's going to be 2 or 3 minutes, and you get 1 to 2 minutes of feedback, because that time span is about 5 minutes. And we really try to keep you on track so that you can rotate around your round table and meet several different in-house counsel for the elevator pitch time. So elevator pitch, you're looking at 2 or 3 minutes, and then getting 1 or 2 minutes of feedback from the specific in-house counsel that you're paired up with at that time, and for feedback. For the formal pitch, when you're in the room, there is kind of a strict maximum 10 minutes. It's a 10-minute pitch, you know, and then I would say room for about 5 minutes worth of, we were telling our in-house counsel partners to provide 5 minutes worth of feedback, just because there's going to be about 3 or 4 pitch participants in each formal pitch room, and so we need to make sure we get that all done within an hour. So strict 10-minute time limit on the formal pitch, and then 5 minutes for feedback on that. So that's what it looks like. And
Yeah,
then,
and oh, sorry, Stephanie.
no, continue, please.
We'll have in each of the breakout rooms for the formal pitch, we'll have a volunteer sort of keeping time, kind of like, I don't know if you did moot court or something in law school, like they might hold up a sign and say, like, you've got a minute left. Please be respectful of that. I mean, a lot of the volunteers are younger lawyers or even some law students. So, you know, don't put them in the position of having to, like, you know, drag you off the stage, so to speak. Be mindful of that. And really, if you keep your pitch to 10 minutes, I think you'll get more valuable feedback in that feedback time slot. So be prepared for that.
Are there any other questions? Again, I know we have a weekend coming up. You know, I definitely would suggest taking some time. Okay, there's one from Avanet. For those who have not done a pitch, is there an example we can see just to know how the format should look? We don't have formal pitches. I would kind of go off of what Sarah and Sean were discussing in the second half of the presentation. You can do a roadmap. Read that mock profile, you know, understand kind of the needs of the business, and develop the roadmap for what the client is and what you can offer the client. In this case, MJ squared, and add your personality to it. That's what I would suggest for that. And Jasmine and Jennifer, if you have any input into that, let me know.
Yeah. The one reason that we've kind of talked about this in the past, like, should someone do an example? Should we show an example? One of the reasons that we don't is truly people do them differently. For example, we have heard glowing reviews from in-house counsel in the past for lawyers who stand up and only sell themselves. I'm an employment lawyer. You get sued for a discrimination claim, you call me. Or we've heard glowing reviews from the in-house counsel who've said, Stephanie sold us on everything McCatherine does. It's full service. If you're a business, you need to call them. Totally different pitches, right? So part of the reason that we don't give a quote example is it really depends on your style. It depends on the kind of firm you're at. Some firms lend themselves to a more global pitch. Some firms are, you know, if I'm an IP boutique, you don't need me for everything. You need me for your IP work. So I think generally, you know, a intro of who you are, what you and your firm are about, a roadmap about what you're going to talk about, and then it really depends. And we've also had, I think we said this at the Lunch and Learn, but really be creative with the mock company profile. There's stuff in there that you could make all kinds of legal issues out of. So, you know, you might come in and say, or you could create something like, hey, I just saw, you know, a Google alert that you guys were sued yesterday. Let me tell you how I can defend that lawsuit. And you make up a lawsuit. Like, literally you can do whatever you want with this pitch, right? Like you can create a fact pattern that this company is going through. You can glob onto something in the profile. Anyway, I'm sort of going on and on, but to say, really like how you spin it after you sort of do the intro and some of the normal things is really up to what kind of practice you have, what kind of firm you have, and really what works best for your personality.
Okay, the
And I
next question.
think I'd add that don't feel like you have to bring a handout for the in-house counsel. And don't feel like you have to have everything written down if you're the type of person that like is just going to read from the page and then
Yeah.
you're not going to have the valuable back and forth. So certainly, you know, as Jennifer said, do what works for you. If you need to have bullet points or, you know, just a few note cards, or if you do need it fully scripted, but you know that you'll still make eye contact and be engaging, you know.
Yeah, and that's just a good point on logistics. Because these are all breakout rooms and not the big space, we do not have a way for you to show a PowerPoint live. So don't plan on that. Certainly if we've had participants make one and sort of pass hard copies around, that's fine. But don't plan on a TV or a screen or something to be able to do that in the room. We just won't have the AV set up for that.
I think there was a question in the chat about I think 5 copies of the PowerPoint presentation is more than enough. You really probably only got to have 3 to 4 in-house counsel in your formal pitch room. And just to piggyback off of, I think, you know, if you get anything from this, from the panel presentations, I do think be genuine to yourself and your strengths in your pitch presentations, both in your elevator pitch and your formal pitch presentation, and that kind of sincerity and your own personality will shine through. And that's what these, I think the in-house counsel look for too, is to see that. So which is also why we don't really pass out a pitch presentation outline, because they can be completely different and unique for each and every person. So that.
Yes.
Okay. I do not see any questions in the chat. So with that being said, we really hope that you enjoyed this pitch presentation. I think it was an absolutely fantastic presentation, and the panelists gave a lot of really good, candid feedback that please continue to use. And we're really, really excited about having you all at the Arts District Mansion on the 30th.
Yay. See you guys then.
You've completed the educational portion of the pitch, and we're looking forward to having everyone back at Arts District Mansion on the 30th and having a wonderful event there. So we'll see you all soon.